I was halfway through ringing up a customer when I heard the baby's wail. My eyes darted toward the entrance, where a young woman shuffled in, cradling a baby in her arms. Her face was pale, her hair damp from the icy drizzle outside. She couldn't have been older than 19. The worn stroller she pushed with one hand looked like it had seen better days, and her oversized coat drowned her small frame. Something about her struck me immediately, desperation masked by forced determination. She avoided eye contact as she made her way to the formula aisle. Her movements were hurried but hesitant, like she was afraid to draw attention, but also racing against the clock. I finished with the customer in front of me, but my gaze kept flicking back to the young mom. She stood in front of the baby formula, fingers twitching as she checked prices. Her lips moved slightly, as if she were calculating in her head, and then she froze. I could see the moment she realized she didn't have enough. The baby in her arms started fussing again, and she bounced him gently, whispering soft reassurances that only seemed to break her more with every word. The store was quiet except for the occasional beep of scanners. My manager, Mr. Daniels, was in his usual spot near the back, pretending to check inventory while actually scrolling through his phone. He didn't care about anyone unless they were causing trouble or costing the store money. I knew better than to ask for help. The girl turned to leave without taking anything, clutching her baby like he was the only thing grounding her to this world. My heart sank. I couldn't let her go like that. I didn't even think. I acted. "Miss," I called out. She stopped, looking over her shoulder with wide, wary eyes. "Wait a second." Her grip tightened on the baby as she slowly walked toward the register. I don't have enough money," she mumbled, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded toward the can of formula she still held. "Let me cover it." Her eyes widened in shock. "No, I couldn't." "It's fine," I said firmly, scanning the item before she could protest further. "You're not leaving here without what you need for your baby." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she bit her lip to keep them from falling. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'll pay you back, I swear." "Don't worry about it," I replied, handing her the bag. "Just take care of your little one." As she left, I noticed a few customers had been watching. Most looked indifferent, but one older man smiled at me like I'd just done something extraordinary. I felt a flicker of warmth until Mr. Daniels stormed up to me. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed, his face red with anger. "You can't just give away merchandise." "It was a few dollars, and she needed it," I argued. "The baby." "I don't care," he snapped. "That's theft as far as I'm concerned. You're lucky I don't call the cops on you." My stomach twisted. "Are you serious?" It was baby formula, not cash from the register. "I'm dead serious," Daniels growled. "And you're fired. Pack up your things." I stood there, frozen, as Mr. Daniels' words sank in. Fired? For helping someone? My hands clenched in a fist at my sides. It wasn't fair, but arguing with him wouldn't change anything. The smug look on his face made my blood boil, but I bit my tongue. He wasn't worth it. "Fine," I muttered, ripping off my name tag and slamming it on the counter. "I'll go." As I gathered my things from the back room, I felt a mix of anger, shame, and regret swirling inside me. I'd only been trying to do the right thing. Was that such a crime? My co-workers avoided my gaze as I walked out, their silence cutting deeper than any words. None of them dared to stick up for me. They were probably afraid of ending up like me, jobless and humiliated. The cold air hit me like a slap in the face when I stepped outside. The young mom was still in the parking lot, struggling to fold up her stroller. She looked up and saw me, her expression shifting to confusion when she noticed the box of my belongings in my hands. "Did you?" she started, but her voice trailed off. "Yeah," I said, forcing a weak smile. Guess Daniels didn't like my act of charity. Her face crumpled with guilt. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen." "Hey," I cut her off gently. "This isn't your fault. You were doing what you had to for your baby. Don't worry about me." She hesitated, then reached in her pocket and pulled out a crumpled bill. "Please take this. It's all I have, but—" "Keep it," I said firmly. "You need it more than I do." For a moment, we just stood there, the weight of the situation hanging heavy between us. Finally, she nodded, tears brimming in her eyes again. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." I watched her leave, the taillights of her beat-up car fading into the distance. I had no job, no backup plan, and barely enough savings to get me through the next month. But as much as my situation sucked, I couldn't bring myself to regret helping her. If I had to choose between keeping my job and doing the right thing, I'd choose the latter every time. The next day, I woke up to the sound of a helicopter. At first, I thought it was just a passing news chopper or a medical flight, but the sound didn't fade. It grew louder, shaking the windows of my tiny apartment. Curious and slightly annoyed, I peeked out the window. What I saw made my jaw drop. A sleek, black helicopter was hovering over the parking lot outside, its blades kicking up dust and debris. A group of men in suits stood nearby, looking up at my building. One of them held a tablet, glancing between the screen and my window. "What the f—" I muttered, pulling on a jacket and heading outside. As soon as I stepped out the door, the man with the tablet spotted me. He waved, and the rest of the group turned to look. Before I could process what was happening, they were walking toward me with purpose. "Are you the cashier from Greenfield Grocery?" the man asked, his voice calm but commanding. I frowned. Got fired yesterday. He smiled slightly, like that was exactly what he'd expected. "I represent a private organization that's very interested in your story. May we talk?" I stared at him, trying to gauge his intentions. This had to be some kind of prank, right? But the seriousness in his expression, and the literal helicopter, suggested otherwise. Sure," I said cautiously. "What's this about?" The man gestured toward the helicopter. "Why don't we discuss it somewhere more private?" I didn't know what possessed me to agree. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe I figured I had nothing left to lose. Either way, I found myself inside the helicopter minutes later, the city shrinking below us as we soared into the sky. The man introduced himself as Mr. Warren, but he didn't offer much else about who he worked for. "We heard about your act of kindness yesterday," he began. "A young mother spoke very highly of you." My stomach tightened. "She told you about that?" "She did," Warren confirmed. "And it turns out, her story caught the attention of someone very influential." I raised an eyebrow. "Influential how?" Warren leaned forward, his expression intense. "Let's just say they have the means to reward people who embody the values they hold dear: compassion, integrity, and courage. You've proven you have all three." My mind was racing. Was this guy serious? And if he was, who on earth would go to these lengths just to thank me for buying formula? "I'm not sure I understand," I said slowly. "What exactly are you offering?" Warren smiled, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, like he knew I wouldn't believe him. "A fresh start. No strings attached. All expenses covered. But more than that, an opportunity to be part of something bigger." I blinked. "Something bigger?" "Let's call it a mission," Warren said cryptically. "But first, you'll need to decide if you're willing to take a leap of faith." I stared at Warren, trying to decipher his words. "A leap of faith? You want me to agree to what exactly?" "An opportunity to rewrite your life," he said, his voice steady. "To take what happened to you yesterday and use it as a springboard to something far greater." I leaned back, the hum of the helicopter filling the silence. The way he spoke made it sound tempting, but it also felt like I was being lured into something too good to be true. I'd learned the hard way that life didn't hand out second chances without a catch. "What's the catch?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. Warren chuckled softly. "You're cautious. I like that. The only catch is that you have to trust us. You'll be stepping into unknown territory, but I can promise you it's worth it. And if I say no?" I pressed. He shrugged. "Then we'll land this helicopter, shake hands, and go our separate ways. No harm, no foul." The simplicity of his answer threw me off. He wasn't pressuring me, and that somehow made it harder to say no. My life as it stood wasn't exactly going anywhere. What did I have to lose? "Fine," I said, crossing my arms. "I'll hear you out. But if this turns out to be some kind of scam, I'm walking." Warren's smile widened. "Understood." The helicopter landed on the rooftop of a high-rise building that gleamed against the afternoon sun. As we disembarked, Warren led me into a private elevator, which descended smoothly to a floor that felt more like a luxury lounge than an office. A woman greeted us with a warm smile. "Welcome, Mr. Carter," she said, addressing me by name. I blinked. How do you know my name? We like to do our homework, Warren said as he guided me toward a sleek conference room. Please have a seat. The room was minimalist but opulent, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. I sat down, feeling both out of place and strangely intrigued. Two other people joined us, a man in his 40s with sharp eyes and a younger woman with a clipboard. This is Mr. Grant and Ms. Lewis, Warren introduced. They'll be helping explain our proposition. Ms. Lewis handed me a folder. Inside, you'll find an overview of our organization, our mission, and how you fit into it. I opened the folder, scanning the pages. The words were vague. Lots of talk about humanitarian efforts, helping those in need, and fostering change. It all sounded noble, but I couldn't shake the feeling there was more to it. What does any of this have to do with me? I asked. Mr. Grant leaned forward, his expression serious. We're looking for people who embody the principles of selflessness and courage. You demonstrated both yesterday. It's rare to find someone who's willing to risk their livelihood for a stranger. I snorted. I didn't think helping someone would cost me my job. Precisely, Grant said. You acted without expecting anything in return. That's the kind of person we need. Grant continued, his voice measured but persuasive. We want you to join our team. You'd be part of a network dedicated to creating meaningful change. Financial stability, training, and resources would all be provided. What kind of network are we talking about? I asked. Think of it as a hybrid between a nonprofit and a think tank, Warren said. We tackle challenges that traditional organizations can't, or won't. That sounds ambitious, I said, still skeptical. What's my role in all this? Warren exchanged a glance with Grant before replying. We believe your story has the potential to inspire others. We'd like to amplify it, connect you with platforms where your voice can make an impact. From there, we'll see where your skills take you. It was a lot to process. Yesterday, I was a nobody working a dead-end job. Now, these people were offering me a chance to reinvent myself, and maybe even do some good along the way. But a nagging doubt lingered. What if I screw up? I asked quietly. Ms. Lewis smiled gently. We're not looking for perfection, Mr. Carter. Just authenticity. After hours of discussion, I finally agreed to their terms. The details were still fuzzy, but something in me felt drawn to this opportunity. It wasn't just about the money or the prestige. It was about proving to myself that I could be more than the guy who got fired for trying to do the right thing. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. They set me up in a better apartment, gave me access to resources I'd only dreamed of, and introduced me to a team of mentors who helped me refine my goals. I learned about public speaking, community outreach, and how to navigate the complexities of nonprofit work. But the most surprising part? The young mom I'd helped, whose name I finally learned was Alyssa, became a close ally. She reached out to thank me again and ended up sharing her story with the organization. Her courage and resilience inspired me, and together, we started brainstorming ways to help other struggling families. Not everything was smooth sailing. As I settled into my new role, I began noticing cracks in the facade. Some of the organization's methods seemed overly calculated, and there were whispers of ulterior motives. Warren and Grant were always polite, but there was an underlying tension that made me wonder if I'd made the right choice. One night, I overheard a conversation between two staff members. They mentioned something about leveraging narratives and maximizing exposure. It sounded manipulative. I started to question whether their mission was as altruistic as they claimed. But then I'd see the impact we were making. Families reunited, lives transformed, and my doubts would waver. Could I walk away from that, even if the organization wasn't perfect? The more I worked with the organization, the more I realized how calculated everything was. Warren, Grant, and their team seemed to have an uncanny ability to spin every story into a powerful narrative. Alyssa's struggles were transformed into a marketing campaign that gained massive traction online. While it brought attention to the plight of young mothers, it also felt exploitative. One evening, while reviewing some of the files in my office, I came across a folder labeled Priority Cases. Inside were detailed dossiers on people like Alyssa, individuals with compelling stories. Each file included notes on how their circumstances could be used to gain public sympathy and, ultimately, donations. It was cold, methodical, and deeply unsettling. I confronted Warren the next day. What the hell is this? I demanded, slamming the folder on his desk. He didn't flinch. It's strategy, Carter. Stories drive change. Stories? These are people's lives. I snapped. You're treating them like chess pieces. Warren sighed, leaning back in his chair. You're still thinking too small. Do you know how many people we've helped because of those strategies? Sometimes, the ends justify the means. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's not what I signed up for. No, he said, his tone turning icy. You sign up to make a difference. And you are. But if you can't handle the reality of how the world works, maybe you're not cut out for this. Warren's words haunted me for days. Every time I saw Alyssa smiling as she worked on outreach programs, I felt like a fraud. She had no idea that her story was being manipulated, and I didn't have the heart to tell her. But my breaking point came during a gala event. The organization had invited wealthy donors, showcasing our work with glossy presentations and carefully curated testimonials. Alyssa was one of the speakers, and her raw, emotional account brought the room to tears. It was genuine, but as I watched Warren and Grant bask in the applause, I felt sick. Later that night, I overheard them discussing the event. This was a huge success, Grant said. The donors ate it up. Alyssa's story alone brought in 6 figures. Warren smirked. She's a gold mine. We should find more like her. That was it. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I spent the next few days gathering evidence. Emails, financial records, meeting notes, anything that showed how the organization was prioritizing profit over people. It wasn't easy. Their security protocols were tight, and I had to tread carefully to avoid suspicion. Alyssa noticed my tension. Are you okay? She asked one afternoon. I'm fine, I lied, forcing a smile. Just a lot on my plate. She didn't look convinced, but she didn't press me either. I hated lying to her, but I needed to protect her from the fallout of what I was about to do. Once I had enough evidence, I reached out to a journalist I trusted. She was skeptical at first, but when I showed her the files, her eyes widened. This is explosive, she said. But are you sure you want to do this? It'll blow up your life. I nodded. It's the right thing to do. The exposé hit the news like a bombshell. Headlines screamed about the organization's shady practices, and donors quickly pulled their support. Warren and Grant went into damage control mode, denying everything and painting me as a disgruntled employee. Alyssa was devastated when she learned the truth. You knew? She asked, tears streaming down her face. You knew they were using me? I didn't know at first, I said, my voice breaking. And when I found out, I tried to stop it. That's why I did this. She shook her head. You should have told me. I wanted to protect you, I said softly. But I'm sorry. I should have been honest. She didn't respond, just walked away, leaving me standing there with a knot in my chest. With the organization in ruins, I knew I had to make things right. I reached out to Alyssa and others who had been affected, forming a small group dedicated to real, transparent change. We started our own grassroots movement, focusing on helping people without exploiting them. It was slow and exhausting work, but it was honest. Alyssa eventually forgave me, though it took time. Together, we rebuilt trust and turned our shared pain into something meaningful. Months later, as I stood in a community center we'd helped fund, a familiar sound filled the air. I stepped outside, shielding my eyes from the sun as a black helicopter descended. Warren stepped out, flanked by 2 men in suits. I'm not here to fight, he said, raising his hands in surrender. I want to talk. What could you possibly have to say? I asked, my tone sharp. You were right, he said simply. I lost sight of the mission. But I want to help you now. No strings attached. I didn't trust him, but part of me wondered if he was genuine. In the end, I told him the same thing he once told me. You'll have to take a leap of faith. Warren's unexpected appearance shook me. I didn't trust him, not after everything he'd done, but I couldn't ignore the resources he offered. If he was serious about helping, it could be a game changer for the work Alyssa and I were doing. Why should I believe you? I asked, keeping my tone measured. Warren sighed, running a hand through his neatly combed hair. Because I've lost everything. The organization's collapse wasn't just a PR disaster. It ruined me. But you've shown me what real impact looks like. I want to be part of it, even if it's just behind the scenes. Alyssa, who had joined me outside, crossed her arms. And we're just supposed to take your word for it? No, Warren admitted. You'll have full control. I'll work under your terms. All I'm asking for is a chance to prove I've changed. Alyssa and I exchanged a look. There was no denying we could use the help, but letting him in felt like inviting a wolf into the henhouse. Fine, I said finally. But if you step out of line, you're gone. True to his word, Warren threw himself into the work. He used his connections to secure funding, brought in volunteers, and even helped us navigate bureaucratic red tape. Despite my initial skepticism, he seemed genuine. But I wasn't ready to let my guard down completely. Alyssa, on the other hand, was openly hostile. She avoided Warren whenever possible and challenged his suggestions at every turn. One night, after a particularly heated argument, she pulled me aside. How can you trust him after everything he's done? She demanded. I don't, I admitted. But if he's willing to help, I'm not going to turn him away. This isn't about him. It's about the people we're trying to help. She sighed, her anger giving way to exhaustion. I just don't want him to hurt anyone else. Neither do I said. That's why we're keeping him on a short leash. Our first major project under the new alliance was a housing initiative for struggling families. It was ambitious, and the odds were stacked against us, but we pushed forward. Warren worked tirelessly behind the scenes, while Alyssa and I handled the ground-level efforts. When the first family moved into their new home, it felt like a victory. Alyssa even managed a small smile when Warren joined the celebration, though she still kept her distance. It's a start, I said as we watched the kids play in their new backyard. It's more than that, Alyssa replied. It's proof we're doing the right thing. Just as things seemed to be stabilizing, trouble reared its head. A journalist from a major outlet contacted me, claiming they had uncovered new information about Warren's past. They were planning to publish a story linking him to financial mismanagement and exploitation during his time with the organization. When I confronted Warren, he didn't deny it. I made mistakes, he said, his voice heavy with regret. But I've been trying to atone for them. You should have told me, I said, my frustration evident. I thought I had more time, he replied. But I understand if you want me to step down. The idea of losing Warren's contributions was daunting, but I couldn't let his presence undermine the trust we'd built with the community. After discussing it with Alyssa, we decided to address the issue head-on. At a press conference, Warren publicly acknowledged his past mistakes. I take full responsibility for my actions, he said, his voice steady. I can't change the harm I've caused, but I'm committed to making amends by supporting this new effort. His honesty earned mixed reactions. Some praised his courage, while others called for him to be removed. Alyssa and I faced criticism for keeping him on board, but we stood firm. Our focus remained on the work, and slowly, the controversy began to fade. The backlash from Warren's confession brought new challenges. Donors were hesitant, and some partners distanced themselves. It felt like we were constantly fighting uphill, but the people we were helping kept us motivated. One day, a single mother named Carla approached us, tears in her eyes. You've given me hope, she said. Thank you for not giving up. Her words reminded me why we started this journey. It wasn't about public opinion or personal grudges. It was about making a difference, no matter how small. Over time, Alyssa and Warren found common ground. Their interactions were still tense, but they began working together more effectively. Warren even surprised me by taking a back seat during meetings, letting Alyssa take the lead. He's trying, Alyssa admitted one evening. I still don't trust him, but maybe he's not all bad. Progress, I said with a small grin. Our biggest breakthrough came when we secured funding for a community center. It would provide childcare, job training, and mental health services, everything struggling families needed to get back on their feet. The grand opening was a huge success. Families poured in, their laughter filling the air. For the first time, I felt like we were truly making a lasting impact. Just when things seemed to be going smoothly, I discovered a troubling detail in our financial records. A significant amount of money was unaccounted for. My heart sank as I realized the only person with access to those funds was Warren. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. It's not what you think, he said quickly. I was transferring the funds to cover an urgent project. Without telling me, I shot back. How can I trust you after this? Warren's justification for the missing funds didn't sit right with me. I demanded proof of where the money had gone. He hesitated, his confident demeanor cracking for the first time since I'd met him. "Look," he said, avoiding my gaze. "I wasn't trying to hide anything. I just thought it would be easier to handle quietly." "Handle what?" I pressed, my voice rising. "This isn't just about money. It's about trust. If you can't be transparent, we can't work together." He finally handed over a file detailing the project. He claimed the funds had been used for a rapid response effort to relocate families in an unsafe housing complex. On paper, it seemed legitimate, but the secrecy had already done its damage. Alyssa was furious when I told her. "I told you this would happen," she said, pacing the room. "You gave him a second chance, and he's proving he doesn't deserve it." I tried to calm her down, but the truth was, I wasn't sure if she was wrong. Determined to get to the bottom of things, I personally visited the housing complex Warren had mentioned. To my surprise, the relocation effort was real. Families were being moved into safer accommodations, and the project manager confirmed Warren's involvement. But there was still something off. The numbers didn't add up. When I dug deeper, I discovered that a portion of the funds had been funneled into a separate account under Warren's name. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. I confronted him that evening. "You lied to me," I said, throwing the evidence on the table. "You said it was for the project, but you kept some for yourself." Warren didn't deny it. "It's not what you think," he said, his voice desperate. "I used it to pay off debts I accrued, trying to keep the old organization afloat. That doesn't make it okay." I shouted. "You stole from the people we're trying to help." "I was trying to fix my mistakes," he pleaded. "Please, don't throw everything we've built away because of this." Alyssa and I called an emergency meeting with the team. The betrayal had shaken everyone, and emotions were running high. Some wanted Warren out immediately, while others argued that his contributions outweighed his mistakes. "We can't keep sweeping things under the rug," Alyssa said, her voice trembling with anger. "If we let this slide, we're no better than the people we're trying to fight against." She was right. As much as it hurt, I knew what needed to be done. Warren was removed from his position and barred from accessing any funds or decision-making processes. He didn't argue, just nodded quietly and walked out of the room. The fallout from Warren's departure was brutal. We lost donors, and trust within the team was fractured. Alyssa and I worked tirelessly to rebuild, but it felt like every step forward was met with 2 steps back. One night, as we were preparing for another community event, Alyssa turned to me. "Do you think we'll ever get it right?" I thought about everything we'd been through, the highs, the lows, and the sacrifices. "I think getting it right isn't about never making mistakes," I said. "It's about owning up to them and doing better." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe we got a chance." A few weeks later, Warren showed up unannounced. He looked worn down, a shadow of the man who had once commanded rooms with his presence. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," he said. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. And if there's any way I can help, even from the sidelines, I'll do it." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face, but another part saw the sincerity in his eyes. After a long pause, I said, "If you're serious, you can start by volunteering. No pay, no decision-making, just the hard work." He nodded. "Deal?" With Warren working quietly in the background, the organization slowly regained its footing. Alyssa and I doubled down on our efforts, focusing on transparency and building trust with the community. It wasn't easy, but little by little, we began to see the results. The community center became a beacon of hope, serving thousands of families. Alyssa and I grew closer, our shared struggles forging a bond stronger than I ever expected. And while Warren would never fully regain the trust he'd lost, his dedication to making amends spoke volumes. In the end, our journey wasn't about perfection, it was about resilience. We had faced betrayal, loss, and doubt, but we'd come out stronger for it. And as I stood on the stage at our 5-year anniversary event, looking out at the sea of faces whose lives we'd touched, I realized something. Even the darkest chapters can lead to light.